Standardized testing. Yeah. Sweet!
Standardized testing. Everyone knows the all too familiar multiple choice standardized test. But how does it affect us? What are the overall impacts of these tests on students? On curriculum? Are they positive or are they negative?
Although there's a lot of research and statistics surrounding standardized testing, results are hardly conclusive. So for our research project, we decided to gather the opinions of many Granite-based staff members and a couple of students to provide a clear perspective of how standardized testing is actually applied in high school and what the effect is on the educational experience.
So, would your teaching methods change if you didn't have to worry about getting students to pass an AP or SAT test?
Probably not my teaching methods, because one of the things I've tried to do is to try to balance out some things I think my job as a teacher is. And one of the jobs is to get the kids ready for the standardized test. That's why I get the big monies.
My biggest beef with the SAT was that it used to be called Standardized Aptitude Test, which was essentially a test of how well you can think through problems and problem solve. Unfortunately, it's not called that anymore. It's called a Standardized Achievement Test, which means that it's how good you can study and come up with the answer that they've pre-programmed into your brain as a result of your studying.
There's some core, fundamental names, words, events, acts that kids should know. For that, I think you go to the multiple choice questions like the AP test has. But the problem with the AP test on the multiple choice question portion of my mind is that you're asking concept questions sometimes that are worded in such a way that sometimes kids who actually know the history stumble on the wording of the question. The wording's so complex and complicated that kids get tripped up on the evaluate of the following, which are the most important kind of things. Something that they may have very well been able to in an essay say, I know the most important stuff about this.
For us, in the math department, the multiple choice questioning is a big thing, you know, because basically geometry is geometry. It's really, when it boils down to it, it's a lot of the same stuff. It's not like they're trying to teach different stuff. It's just the way they question it, the level of the questions that we have to do it.
It's just some hoop that we have to go through to where you know, you have the exit exam, you have AP exams, you got IB exams, you got standardized testing. It just seems like another thing that they throw on there.
So the teachers have to teach the test because of, you know, the repercussions if you don't, and if we bomb, you know, STAR test or whatever else. And so that's what the state thinks is important, and I think it's ridiculous.
We do have in mind what our kids need to know. And some of that's based on standardized testing in the sense that things will be covered on the standardized test. However, as an AP literature teacher, I have to teach, the way I look at it is I teach skills. I'm a skill-based teacher. As long as I understand that I need what my kids understand, I don't have to base it on something they'll have to bubble in later.
I don't know if I agree with teaching to the test, but making sure that the topics that they cover and the style of questioning, like the multiple choice, we cover and review in great detail.
It's a good way for us as teachers to understand that we need to do well enough on those to keep the government off our back. So it's a game that gets played ultimately.
Do you think your teaching style would change at all, or like the structure of your curriculum would change if you didn't have to worry about standardized testing?
Well, I think it has, and I've been doing this for 13 years, so this test I think has been around for 5 or 6, so it clearly has, even though we really don't want it to, but it clearly has, because you have to account for the fact that whether we like it or not, the state of California is judging.
So I don't have a problem with the idea of standardized testing. I think it's important that there's some across-the-board measurement when you're comparing people who are applying to your college, or when you're trying to see who's mastered a subject in the case of an AP test. But I do think that the way we've applied it is a little ridiculous. We have so many tests that we have to take as juniors that standardized testing ultimately comes to define our academic success in some ways.
I think the biggest change of the teaching styles is going to be that teachers as a group of their subject matter are going to be asked to come to consensus about what they want to teach.
I mean, honestly, I would say I'm one of those that says I'll never teach to a standardized test. But now I'm actually talking to my staff, my department members, and going, make sure you cover some of this stuff that's on the standardized test. Not that I want to teach towards the test. I honestly want to shut these people up, and you know, your standardized test is still useless, but we can do good on it. Watch. And so I just want that to happen.
To me, the real benefit is that, you know, it does give you a barometer of where everybody in California, of what they know.
I think having a constant measure in the classroom, I think when the teacher is aware of what he or she is teaching and understanding the expected outcome that he has or she has for that student, that and constantly adjusting the curriculum by small measures. They can be tiny little, you know, at the end of the class, write down what you understand about Piggy and Jack's relationship. Well, if I read through those really brief comments that 95% of my students understand Piggy and Jack's relationship, I can move forward. If I read down there and go, oh crud, only half of them get it, I have some teaching to do. And then I can do my own measurements that way. They don't have to be on some number test. Those are good ways for the government to keep track of what we're doing.
History-wise, we've never cared about standardized tests. I come to work to share math and science-y things with you guys, and honestly, I don't care how somebody who sits at a State Department makes a test and goes, hey, let's see how the kids do. It's like, but lately, a couple things. The math curriculum we used, the integrated system, never lined up with any standardized test. But again, I was one of the motors behind getting those books, and I thought it was good stuff, and I didn't care. Well, now they've been talking about restricted funding, talking about how the standardized tests you should be able to blah, blah, blah. So we kind of gave in and said, we'll get the traditional books, we'll gear up, we'll do better at standardized tests. Kids need to know that we want them to care, to get good numbers, to show how good they are at math, because those numbers will help us get funding.
My opinion on standardized testing is they're kind of a waste of time, and nobody ever tries on them anyway, so why have them?
We're going to kind of change our attitude and say, okay, the standardized tests do matter for a number of reasons. Just show off how good you are and just nail the darn thing. Do it for yourself, do it for the school, do it for me if I'm your math teacher, you know, show that you're as good as you can be on this test.
With standardized testing so ingrained in our schools, what could the future of our educations look like in the classroom?
Alright class, we're doing something different today. I noticed from your quizzes that you took that you guys suck at bubbling. So what I have up here are the common mistakes that were made during the bubbling, and it's really important that we don't miss stupid points because we're bubbling wrong, because, well, my pay is dependent on it. Just think of it this way. Anytime that you are misbubbling, or you aren't making an active effort to make sure that those bubbles are perfect, it's as if you're spitting in my face or defecating on school campus, which we both know are illegal. So, up here, and you see the first problem is overzealous bubbling, where the bubbling actually went up and over. And here is the crossing out technique, which is all about, you didn't even have to show up for the test if you were going to bubble like this. This is just ridiculous. Do you need it? Do you need to excuse yourself? You okay? Yeah. Are you alright? Yeah. And the last one we have is shading, where you aren't actually bubbling. And all these things are bad. You see what I did there with the sketch to the left? No, well. Alright, this one was actually the most creative bubbling I've ever seen. I didn't know this needed emphasizing, but under no circumstance should you ever turn one of your Scantron bubbles into a pastoral or colonial scene. It's creative how they use the A, but this is just wrong.
So all joking aside, standardized testing results aren't going to determine the pay of Granite Bay teachers, for example, but it can determine things like funding, which is why there's been an increased emphasis on standardized testing, especially in the past few years. Whether that's ultimately a good or bad thing for our education system is up for you to decide.